Hello guys, welcome back to the Python series, and this will be officially our last topic for this basic Python series. And welcome back, this is Keyur Ganatra here, and today we will talk about something called as functions. Now before starting with the discussion what are functions or all these things, first today we will start with a different way. First let's write some simple code. What we will do is we will take input from the user. Basically we will take two numbers from the user and then we will add them and print them. Simple. So what I would like that at this stage now you guys must have a good hands on Python, so you guys can pause the video, first write the code and then can verify. Okay, so let's start. So I hope you guys paused the video and wrote the code. So now let's write the code and check whether you guys were right or not. So what we want to do is take two numbers from the user. So let's declare one variable num1 and int. Again we need the numbers, we want to add those numbers, right? So we need them in the integer type. So we will typecast to int and then input, and here we will say enter number1, okay, or enter the first number. Then we have num2 equals to int input enter number2 or second number. Okay, now what we will do is we will declare another variable, that is number3, or we can directly print as well, that print num1 plus num2, but here I will go with this approach. So num3 is equals to num1 plus num2 and then print num3. Okay, so now first let's run this code and see whether it is working or not, and it will work fine, right? We have that knowledge right now at this stage in the series. So still let's verify. So let's say first number is 3, second number is 5, we will get 8, and yes, we are getting. So our code is working absolutely fine. Now what was the moral of the story, or why we wanted to write this code? Let's say this is a 4 lines of code to add some numbers, and let's say this is the requirement of your project. So right now your requirement was served that you wanted to add 2 numbers, but again if there is a requirement of this same piece of code to add some numbers, but that is after 100 or 200 lines of your code, at that time what you will do? You will write the code again probably, or you will scroll up, you will copy paste and just change the variables if required and all these things. But still it's a lengthy procedure, right? And we as a programmers don't want to do that. We are programmers, we want to do some smart work rather than doing much of our hard work. Again, hard work is really important, but at times where you can do your things with the smart work, don't go for the hard work. So here what we want to do is we want to use this same piece of code again. So there comes the key for functionality of Python or of programming, that is called as functions, that we are about to learn. So what are functions? Functions are block of code that help us to reuse our code. Basically the block functions help in reusability feature of a programming languages, and these functions are the code that we can write once and use them n number of times. Okay, and these functions, this piece of the code won't execute until we call a function. Okay, so we will see all these things, that how to declare a function or how to call a function in the few minutes after in this video. So first let's see the syntax of how to create a function. So let's remove this code. Okay, not here. So let's remove this code and first see the syntax to write a function. The function starts, first we will need to define a function, right? That is to write a function. So to define a function we have a Python keyword again, that is def keyword. So we will start with def, that stands for define or definition of a function. Then here will be, okay, then comes the function name, that is the name of the function that you want to give, and then comes this parenthesis and this colon, and hit enter, and the block of the code will be created again like it is done for our loops and conditions, all these things. Now what is this? First, this def is a keywork that says that define a function with this name. So here will be your function name, whatever the name you want to give to the function, and this parentheses are very important in function. So these are the parentheses. Again, in this parenthesis we can pass optional parameters, parameter 1, parameter 2 and so on. So these parameters are optional. So we will see what are these parameters in this video later. So first, this is the syntax of the functions, and here are the block of code. Okay, the spellings are not going with me today. Yeah, block of code, and again this is indented. So this is a structure of a function. So let's write a function to add two numbers. Okay, so again what we will do is start with def keyword. We will give it a good name, that is add, and again we will write that 4 lines of code. That first num1 is equals to num1 is equals to int input enter number 1, num2 is equals to int input enter number 2, and then print num1 plus num2, not 3 but 2. So we are ready with our code. Okay, that's why it is showing us this error. Now it's gone. So this is our function to add two numbers. That is, we will take two numbers from the user and then directly print it. So now let's try and run this code. So let's try and run this. Okay, nothing happened, and we can see that code finished with exit code 0. Now why it is showing us that it finished with exit code 0, still we can't see any functions or any output, because this function was just defined. As we discussed, to use a function, let it be a single time or multiple times, we need to call that function. So how to call that function? It's very simple in Python. Just outside this block of code, just write the name of function, that is add, and with this parenthesis, and now run this function. See, the function was executed. Now it is asking us for the numbers. So 2, 3 and 5. We have got 5. So our goal was accomplished, that is to write a function to add two numbers again. And the problem that we were discussing, that is if you want to use this code after 100 lines, now what you have to do is, at the place where you want to use this code, you just have to call that function rather than writing this piece of code again. Right now we had just 3 to 4 lines of code, so it might seem that we will write that code manually. But if that code is of 50 lines or 100 lines or more, then it is a hectic task. So at that time functions come in handy. Now this is a very bad way of writing a function. If you in a function, if you want to take the input from the user, we generally use parameters. Now what are these parameters, we will see. So first let's remove this code inside, and now from the user in the add function, from the user we are expecting two variables, right? One will be num1 or num2 or whatever name you want to give, that a, b or xy. So we are expecting at least two values. So that two values will go inside the function as a parameter. So we will define it here, num1 and num2. So these are called as parameters, and parameters again depend upon the requirement. Let's say if we want to add 3 numbers, then we will give 3 parameters, and that again so depends upon the requirement. So here our requirement is just 2 numbers to add them, so we will pass just num1 and num2. Again, these are just variables, you can pass x, y, a, b or anything. So these are just variable, and what we will do is that we will add or directly, okay, rather than this, what we will do is num3 is equals to num1 plus num2, and then return num3. Now what is this return thing? We didn't saw this last time, right? Because in the last video we were directly printing something. But what is this return thing? Sometimes when we write some block of a code, we don't want to directly print the output or directly print whatever the function has processed. We would like that function just to return it, and we will print it, or we will put it into the database, or we will process that later. So that's why we use the return keyword. That return keyword says that terminate the function for now and just return the value. Don't print it or don't do anything. We will process it later. So this return keyword is used to terminate a function. So this return keyword, and this return keyword is used only once in a function. So this return keyword will terminate the function, and the value that you want to return or that you want to give from that function is written beside it. So we want that addition value, that is num3. So we will write here return num3. Okay, now let's try and run this code. Now see, this was that I wanted to tell you that now this will give us error that add is missing required positional arguments, that is num1 and num2. So this is something that is missing. So again, when your function has parameters, so when you call the function you have to pass the parameters. So this parameters, let's say this is 2 and 3, you want to add 2 and 3, and then let's write the function, run the function, and this time we haven't got anything, and function was again finished with exit code 0. And why? This we discussed that we are just returning the values, we are not printing anything. So how if we want the values to be printed or put them into the database or something else? So right now our requirement is just to print them. So how to do that? That we will do using just writing print, and we will pass this whole thing inside the print function. That the value that is returned, please print that value. So now let's run this program again, and it will print 5, and we have got 5 this time. So I hope you understand these two things, that what is a function without parameters and this is a function with a parameter. So these were the basic concepts of a function. Similarly, please try defining functions for addition, multiplication, subtraction and all these things. Now let's say that you want to make this function more dynamic. You pass the values at when the function was called. So rather than adding directly manually writing the values, what we can do is we can define two variables outside the function, that is num1 and num2, and we will ask the user to enter the values. Let's say that variables that we defined were num1 and num2. So this is num1 and this is num2. So we let's say we have a code in which we are taking the values from the user, and that we have took the values in num1 and num2. So when we call the function, rather than passing the values directly, even we can pass those variables. So this will make our function more dynamic. The previous way was making our function be a bit rigid, right? It was not so rigid because at the end we were passing the values, but that was manually. This time we want the user to pass the values, and that will directly go as a function parameters here. So when the function is called, this num1 and num2 will replace by this num1 and num2. Again, it is not necessary that the name of the parameter in the function and name of the parameter in the function call should be the same. They both can be different. It is understood internally that the first parameter will be matched with the first parameter and the second parameter will be matched with the second parameter. So this was the discussion on functions. And one more thing that I want to discuss is, let's say we encountered this error just right now, right? That add, when we called the add function and didn't pass any values, we got some error, right? And that error said that add missing two required positional arguments, that is num1 and num2. That means you want to call the function, execute the function, but this function compulsorily takes two arguments. But let's say there are some conditions that you don't want, don't keep it compulsory. Like if the user enters the value, it's okay. Otherwise, if the user don't enters the value, then we will provide some default value. There are times, there are many of the such scenarios, right? So if you want to provide some default values, that if the user does not provide any particular value, then we will use that default value rather than throwing error to the user. So again, here the key functionality comes is, that is user experience. Rather than giving errors to the user, what we can do is we can handle those errors without throwing any errors. So if the user doesn't pass any values, we will give the if the user doesn't passes any values, then we will provide with the default values. So how the default values are done? That are very simple. Default values, let's say for the number 1 you want to give a default value, that if the user doesn't pass any value, the default value will be 0. So this will be 0, and default value for this also will be 0. Now try and run the code, and it won't give you any error, and it will give you answer as 0. Because the default value of num1 is 0 and num2 is also 0, so num1 plus num2 will return 0. And since we have printed when the function was called, so it is printing 0. So this was just an example of what are these default values in Python. You can explore more and create a really good calculator using this method, such as add, multiplication, subtract, divide and all these things. So I hope this concept was clear, and let's catch up in the next video where we will discuss more on functions. So until then, please like, share and subscribe, and please keep writing quality code and keep practicing.